Welcome to On TESOL's video series for new teachers. In each video, we focus on an important skill that will help you to improve your teaching. My name is Aaron, and in this video, we'll be tackling the challenging topic of teaching beginners. Let's get started. Teaching beginners requires skill, patience, and compassion. In my opinion, it can be the most challenging of levels, but also the most rewarding. In this video, I'm going to be talking about who beginners are, some of the unique challenges and needs as learners that beginners have, and some strategies that we can use to enhance their learning experience. Within the category that we call beginner, as an all level, there is a range of abilities. We divide these into two main groups: true beginners, who have literally no or almost no previous exposure to English, and false beginners, those who have studied some English in the past and maybe know the alphabet and a few words or even phrases, but can't form sentences and have little understanding of basic grammar. What makes teaching beginners unique? Beginners typically face more challenges than other students. If they're studying abroad, they may not feel very comfortable in their new environment because they can't communicate in the main language. This can be fairly stressful. It can be difficult to know what's happening when beginners are not improving at a normal pace. Sometimes, students are in beginner classes because they've not had the opportunity to study English, and many of these students advance quickly to the next levels. On the other hand, some students in your beginner classes will be there because they've experienced challenges with learning more generally, or they've had some other form of learning disability. It might also be that they had negative experiences in the past with learning English, and they don't like it, or that they see themselves as bad at it. Some students might be struggling with the pressure that they feel in learning English quickly, which can be very overwhelming. They might develop what Stephen Krashen has called an affective filter, a kind of wall of emotion that can make learning quite difficult. A negative attitude toward learning English can be counteracted in part by a teacher who challenges and supports students through fun and interesting teaching that takes into account the unique challenges that beginners sometimes face. Let's look at some strategies that we can use to do this. The concept of scaffolding is extremely important in the teaching of beginners. In language teaching, scaffolding means providing full support at the beginning of a lesson and then slowly removing layers of support until students are independently able to produce the target language. I'm going to illustrate how a teacher builds and slowly deconstructs a scaffold over the course of a lesson so that the beginner students can work towards independent use of new language. It's worth reading more about scaffolding at the link that I've provided on the slide. Sequencing in a beginning course is crucial because you need to have a very clear picture of what the students know. When we begin planning our lesson, we need to think about where students are at and where we want them to go. Think about what they need to know, for example, if the focus of your lesson is on weekly schedules. If your target language point, or the new language point that you introduce, is the simple present, you need to assume that the students already know a few things. They should already know the days of the week, some basic syntax, and a few verbs that describe their weekly activities. It's also nice if they know the names of a few different places and some prepositions that we use for time and place. So if my goal for the lesson is for students to be able to talk about their weekly schedules, I have to show them early on what that looks like. There are a number of ways we can introduce an example. I like to have students be as active as possible in the process, so I like to use something called a running dictation. I put an example of the kind of paragraph that I want my students to produce on the wall of the classroom. I show them the target language and context. Then, I'll divide the students into pairs and have each partner take turns walking up to the paragraph, reading and remembering a sentence or two, and then returning to their partner who will write it down. Have them switch halfway. Now, the student who was listening and recording the sentences is going to stand up, go over to the wall, remember as much as they can from the text, and bring it back to their partner, who will write it down. I love using running dictations with beginners because it gets them really early on developing their reading, speaking, listening, writing, and pronunciation skills in a really active way with lots of support. It also shows them a clear example of the goals that they're trying to achieve for that lesson. When everything's said and done, I would have the class sitting down together, pulling out some of the important groups of words that they saw in the running dictation, and make sure that they know clearly what the goals of that lesson are and how they relate to what they just saw. At this point, you're ready to do a short lesson on the simple present. Ask students what they notice about the verbs. Try to elicit the rule that when the subject is he, she, or it, the verb will take an S. And write the conjugations clearly on the board. Keep your language really simple. Try to show students the rules rather than giving them long, wordy explanations through the examples that they see in a lesson. Instead of asking students whether or not they understand, test their comprehension with little grammar questions along the way, so that you can get a clear picture of where they stand with the concept. For the practice stage in a lesson for beginners, you're going to remove a little of the scaffolding. In this lesson, for example, you could give students a person's weekly schedule and have them complete sentences starting with prompts. In pairs, students look at the prompt and then scan the calendars that you've given them for info to help them complete the sentence. Always do 1 or 2 examples as a class before turning it over to them. For the next step, have students switch partners and come up with their own questions about their new partner's schedule. Make sure students are able to focus on the grammar by using simple vocabulary. If they're getting caught up on lots of words that they don't recognize, they're not going to be able to move fluidly through the grammar exercises. For production, have students pair up and write a paragraph, like the one they saw at the beginning of the lesson, about their own real schedules. We're getting them to get independent and more personal. Give them access to dictionaries or your help, and have them try to recreate in writing a fairly accurate paragraph using the grammar and vocabulary that they've been practicing. Encourage them to take risks and make mistakes, but provide clear feedback and explanations when questions arise. Have them post their paragraphs around the walls of the classroom and take a walk around to see each other's work. Help them to acknowledge what they just accomplished by reviewing the lesson goals. Provide them with the opportunity for more practice by giving them the option of doing a homework assignment. You could ask them to write about the schedule of a person they know. This way, they get a chance to review the day's lesson one more time, and you get a sense of how they're understanding the material. Before we wrap up, there are a few things I'd like to stress. Always treat beginner students as though they are intelligent and accomplished. Remember that they've got so many skills and things to offer beyond their English. Invest time in differentiating your instruction for students who are either lagging behind or ahead of the class. Finally, concern yourself with your students' social and emotional well-being to some extent. If you're able to establish trust and good learning routines, you can have them working hard and their improvement will be quickly evident. This is really one of the most rewarding jobs a language teacher can have. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy your teaching.